Echo dropped in early January on Disney Plus, and we kind of knew this thing probably wasn't going to go well. I think Kevin Feige and everyone at Marvel Studios knew that Echo wasn't really a very good project. You know, they had a lot of issues, I guess, the first time around when they filmed the show. Kevin Feige said, well, this is unwatchable the way that it is. They decided to beef it up with more Daredevil and Kingpin to draw a few more eyes to it. And then when they got to the final product, they're like, we're going to release this like we've never released any other Disney Plus MCU show before. We're just going to binge it all. We're going to throw all episodes onto the platform at the same time and just kind of be done with it, because this thing has been an absolute disaster from the beginning. I think they made a lot of mistakes just with the Echo character, you know, which debuted in the Hawkeye series, which I kind of liked. I kind of liked the Jeremy Renner, Haley Steinfeld Hawkeye show that was kind of centered around Christmas. It was kind of a family-centric show with Hawkeye needing to get home in time for Christmas, but needing to help out the new Hawkeye before he was able to do that, you know, Kate Bishop and all that stuff. And I think they made a huge mistake going with Echo, because I don't really know what they were thinking, expecting people to be really drawn to that character when she really had zero screen presence. She had zero charisma added to the character, and you're just kind of going, man, I wish you would get out of here. Well, it's great that this is going to be the introduction of Vincent D'Onofrio playing Wilson Fisk Kingpin in the MCU, but it felt like an enormous waste. And this is the way Variety describes it, which is very misleading. Echo, the Marvel Cinematic Universe's newest TV show, made its debut on Nielsen's weekly streaming rankings in 10th place for the week of January 8th through 14th. The series was watched for 731 million minutes in its first 6 days of availability on Disney Plus. This marks a success for the MCU, as its TV projects typically fail to make Nielsen's overall top 10 chart when they first premiere, instead debuting on the streaming originals chart and progressing towards the overall chart over a matter of weeks. For example, Season 2 of Loki premiered in October, but didn't appear on the charts until its finale aired in November. So there you have Variety claiming, oh yeah, this is a success because it debuted at the very beginning, but they basically changed the way that they're releasing the show. And there have been a string of flops for the MCU on Disney Plus. It does appear that Loki Season 2 is a little bit of an outlier, but we had Secret Invasion, we had the Miss Marvel show. They just had a lot of stuff that people weren't really interested in. To Kevin Feige and Marvel Studio and Disney Plus's credit, they did try to give Echo every advantage that they could, releasing every episode all at once, so it would have obviously that bingeability right out of the gate to increase the viewership minutes. Although it doesn't appear that that actually translated to more viewers, it actually appears that it likely had less viewers than Miss Marvel, which was pretty infamous at the time for being the lowest viewed MCU show on Disney Plus of all time. And the thing that Miss Marvel really had going against it was Miss Marvel is really a show made for teenage and tween kind of girls. It's a very smaller audience compared to what the other Disney Plus MCU shows have been. And certainly Echo had a lot of advantages because it was for an older audience, more in line with the typical MCU viewership. We also had not the debut of Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock. Obviously, we saw that in Spider-Man No Way Home. But we also saw that character in She-Hulk. But we certainly did get that favorite character within Echo, and a lot more of a Kingpin, who obviously debuted in the Hawkeye show, all kind of leading up to Daredevil Born Again. And you can kind of see how Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios saw this. They realized Echo wasn't working. They tried to tweak it just a little bit. It still wasn't working. And they said, well, the hell with it. Let's just put it all out there and just be done with it. Whereas Daredevil Born Again, which was originally, I think, going to be 18 episodes, they're like, yeah, this is a disaster. This isn't anything that people that actually like Daredevil are looking for. They actually just kind of got rid of everything, brought in new writers, and just revamped the entire thing. And now we're basically getting a continuation of the Daredevil series on Netflix, which is a really smart choice because they actually probably can make a lot of money with that version of Daredevil, where I don't think there was ever really any money to be made off of Maya Lopez Echo, played by Alako Cox. Now, no offense to her, she just isn't a very good actress. I'm sure she wanted to do a great job. She just wasn't really capable. And, you know, we all saw the fight choreography and everything. It was kind of a joke. She was really slow, unathletic. And whenever they would like change her out with like the stunt double, you could clearly see that it was another person. So really bad visuals along with that. You could tell that they didn't put a whole lot of heart and soul into it in the end process because they knew they had a stinker on their hands. And even if you look at the reviews of it, they aren't exactly positive in comparison to the rest of the MCU on Disney Plus. Now let's look at these numbers and kind of break it down with a little bit more of an honest lens to it. Marvel dropped all the Echo episodes at one time on the Disney Plus and Hulu streaming services, so while it is hard to compare ratings to other shows that drop weekly episodes, we can simply compare averages. Nielsen reports the week all 5 Echo episodes dropped, they were watched for 731 million minutes, which only averages out to about 146.2 million minutes an episode. Echo was also released on both Disney Plus and Hulu. The 146.2 million minutes an episode is shared between both streaming services. The other MCU shows were only released on Disney Plus. So once we actually start breaking this down, that they released all 5 episodes at the exact same time. They've never really done that before. It wasn't released exclusively on Disney Plus. It was also released on Hulu. So there's far more eyes and viewers available to the show, certainly on the first week of viewership. And now you're starting to see just how bad this is. Yeah, that 731 million minute number kind of sounds pretty good until you start thinking about it and what it actually means. The fact that it was on 2 platforms and it was every single episode available at the exact same time, when the average comes out to 146.2 million minutes per episode. Now, I do imagine there were more viewers or minutes to the very first episode than the second episode, and it probably trickled down over time because it wasn't a very good show. And likely a lot of people just kind of gave up on it by the end, or some people maybe didn't have time to just finish it in that very first week. So there's a decent chance that perhaps Echo was able to pull in like Miss Marvel numbers, what Miss Marvel was able to do on that first episode. But this was also available on Hulu at the exact same time. And then you're starting to get into absolute disaster territory. We're talking all-time embarrassments, coming out of this Echo show that a lot of people would like to tell you. When I say a lot of people, I'm talking about the shill media, would like to tell you it was a great show, but it was almost like really hampered from the very beginning because this is a character and an actress that check a lot of boxes. So you can't really concentrate on her being Echo and her ties to Kingpin. It's got to be that she's Native American. It's got to be that she uses sign language because she's deaf. It's got to be that she's missing some limbs. It's got to be all that cultural stuff in there. So it ends up being overloaded with all the crap that you didn't really care about and not really concentrating on the ties to the MCU and the MCU characters that you actually wanted to see. And I imagine that probably did turn a lot of people off in time. And of course, they didn't even stick really to the comic book origins and power set of who Echo really is. So even, longtime Marvel Comics fans, and maybe Echo is their favorite character and they would like to be out there telling everybody how great this is. You show up on the show and you're like, oh, this isn't actually Echo. This is another character with the name of Echo, and they kind of ruined it right there. For comparison to Miss Marvel, the week Miss Marvel episode 1 was released on Disney Plus, saw 249 million minutes according to Nielsen. Secret Invasion, another notorious flop, 461 million minutes for the week episode 1 was released. She-Hulk, the first episode didn't make the Nielsen ratings, but the week episode 2 was released, saw 390 million minutes, and then week 3 saw 472 million minutes. Samba TV also didn't even report the numbers on Echo, likely because they were absolutely terrible and didn't make a measurable impact, so it wasn't actually worth reporting on. So once you start getting into some of these numbers, it starts looking worse and worse and worse in comparison's sake. And what will really be, I guess, the measuring stick of whether this is a bigger disaster than Miss Marvel as far as a streaming property of MCU on Disney Plus is when we get to the second week after they dropped everything the first week and it showed up in the top 10. Is it in the top 10 again? I highly doubt that this program will make another dent in the Nielsen top 10 streaming ratings because it barely squeaked in there the first time on 2 different platforms in the exact same week, and the reviews weren't very good, and the visuals were bad, and the fact that it's not really the character, and the tie-ins aren't very good, and kind of at the same time, this was a bad strategy because now you've attached Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock Daredevil to She-Hulk, which everyone hates, and now you've attached it pretty closely to Echo, a show no one cares about, and you've kind of done the same thing with Kingpin. Although at least he was in the Hawkeye show, which was much better and more well-received. I think people, generally speaking, kind of like that show. I didn't personally like the portrayal of Kingpin in that show, but overall, I kind of like that show. And now you're attaching him to this stinkorama before Daredevil Born Again ever comes out. It just feels like an enormous waste of time and resources. And at the same time, you're kind of denigrating and devaluing 2 key pieces of what should be the future of streaming for the MCU on Disney Plus. And I think this entire strategy has backfired on them big time. And we likely won't ever see a season 2. In fact, we did have someone associated with the show basically saying, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Now that we've seen the numbers, we kind of know why. Following the release of Marvel Studios' Echo, the Direct spoke exclusively to Echo cinematographer Kira Kelly and questioned her about the potential for Echo Season 2. While Kelly noted she was not sure that Echo Season 2 would be the next step for Alaco Cox's Maya Lopez, she stressed that it would be great to see Cox return in the MCU's future, basically stating, I wouldn't expect to see Echo return in her own show for a Season 2, but you might see her in Daredevil Born Again. We do have some Avengers flicks coming up, with the Kang Dynasty, Avengers 5, whatever that is, Avengers Secret Wars out there. Maybe we'll see her there, but it doesn't sound like we're going to see this character with this actress portraying her anytime soon within the MCU. And that's basically a smart choice. She was never an enormously popular character in Marvel Comics to begin with. Never the linchpin to anything really important. She is an interesting character, but never a character that was even like C or B list, let alone A list, that you would expect to be able to carry their own TV show. And quite frankly, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios have made a ton of mistakes with this entire thing and picked a lot of characters that never really got any shine. If you were going to spit anything out of that Hawkeye series, they probably should have just waited for Daredevil Born Again and be like, hey, there, you got your Kingpin, whatever. But they had to do something. I guess Kate Bishop would have been the better call, because at least there you have a lead actress that can actually pull her own weight and probably lead an entire show based around Kate Bishop's version of Hawkeye, which was certainly better in the MCU than it was in Marvel Comics. Another character that kind of failed, but at least they went out there and they got that lead actress that can do it. Haley Steinfeld, while being a very young actress, has had a lot of lead roles, has a lot of charisma, has a lot of likability to her. Not saying that Alaco Cox isn't likable or anything like that, but she has no charisma. She has no screen presence. She just doesn't have that it factor to lead anything. And quite frankly, I don't know why they cast her to be like a little bit player in Hawkeye to begin with, because she didn't do anything there either. So this was destined to fail from the very beginning. Kevin Feige, you got what you deserved, another disaster on your hands, and you better get it right with Daredevil Born Again, because people have already lost patience, and that might be your last chance to actually get people to buy into the MCU on Disney Plus again. If you would like further coverage of comic books and pop culture centered around comic books, obviously we have all the great stuff here on YouTube, which I enjoy doing, but we have a lot more long form content on the Patreon. We do a lot of different podcasts, specifically The Geek Fix every single week with my good friend Aaron Sparrow, which is more pop culture related, but we also have all the comic book reviews you could ever want. With my good friend Jim from Weird Science, we have a Q&A with Talk, so all of your favorite guests from the channel on the podcast every single week. If you haven't checked that out, there's a link in the video description.